Hey everybody, this is Mickey G. Have you ever heard that saying that the Lord takes care of fools and babies? Well, Rodney and I talk about that saying in this edition of Old Fools Talking Old School.
All this bombing campaign was about was to distract you from Epstein, was getting close to his ass, you know. And now that's on the back page, because the American people forget like it was 10 years ago. And but that's all he was doing. And him and Netanyahu both trying to stay out of jail. That's why they want to, here you are supposed to be so smart and you're the fearless leader, but you let Netanyahu coerce your ass into following behind him in a war. Because you're both war criminals in the bottom line. Yeah. So I just man, I don't even want to dignify this with my attention.
Well, and that was something else I didn't quite understand, Well, we bombed them because Israel was going to bomb them, so we did it. I never quite understood that either. What has that got to do with anything? Let them fight their own war. Why are we doing that? I never understood that.
That's just a juvenile answer to, well, he hit me, kind of thing. I mean, so now we follow Netanyahu and Israel when they do something. Well, since Israel bombed them, we knew they were going to strike back, so we had to go bomb them too. Is that all it takes, you dumb mother sucker? I'm like, boy, this is something else. And especially when you're dealing with other people's lives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that don't bother him, Just instead of showing compassion, when those first airmen, got killed over there. Instead of showing compassion, oh, that's part of war. That's part of war. It's going to happen more. It's going to happen more. That's just part of war. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you can say that because you've never been there. You got out of even doing your part of it. So it don't bother you. I mean, just show a little compassion, but that's part of war. It's going to happen. It's going to happen some more. So get ready for it. I'm like,
he ain't got no compassion for nobody.
I ain't seen nobody like that in my life, and I just think, as they say, Lord don't like ugly.
I'm telling you.
He'll get his. He'll get his. And I mean, I'm not, once again, I'm not wishing bad on nobody. But I think sometimes, my mom used to say, you sow what you reap what you sow.
Yes,
so
indeed.
I think that's going to happen. And she said, you reap what you sow, and you're going to sow it on this earth. You're going to reap it on this earth. So
yeah,
we'll see.
When I was down there in Texas County, somebody was saying, what were they saying? I can't remember what it was. Because sometimes I just get so fed up, I just can't. And if you think it, you done said it. Hell, stop trying to suppress it to make yourself look like you're just so righteous. I want to see his retribution is what I want to see. And, like I told whoever it was I was saying, I forget what they were saying. I said, well, you're religious, right? So, yeah. You said, well, God created everything, right? Right. I said, well, he created this animosity I'm feeling. So I don't feel bad about feeling it because he gave me that reasoning power. I said, I'm not wishing nothing bad, but I damn sure won't be upset if something bad.
Well, it's like I say, for somebody that says they're glad somebody died, I mean, yeah, it's very easy to say, well, if the same thing happened to you, there's probably a whole lot of people that say the same thing.
Exactly.
If somebody come out, especially somebody in that public of a position, to say something like that, there's a lot of people that probably are wishing the same thing on him, which I know it's a terrible thing to be that way. But sometimes I think things and people can make you feel that way,
Yes,
and I
indeed.
think he's one of the ones that's done that. He's said things, he's done things that just get you to that point, and that's a terrible thing. People should not have that kind of feeling about anybody else. Death to me is not good in any way around, But to say things like that, it makes you just want time to say, okay, that's exactly how we feel about you too.
Exactly. He gonna find out. Well, he'll be dead and gone, but he gonna find out because that Just like that parade that he tried to put on, thinking people were going to be out there praising him. He going to get it. When that hearse is driving down 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he going to get his cheers,
Yeah.
because there's going to be a whole lot of people happy. And there's like this No King coming up. Well, they're expecting 10 million people. Yeah, you're going to get that. You're going to get it, but not like the way you think you're going to get it.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And once again, I even go back to the civil rights movement and even back to the days of slavery. You know, where are all our churches and our religious people who, come up on and are taught, empathy and compassion and things like that? Where are those people who should be stepping out in droves saying, I don't care who you are. You don't say you're glad somebody is dead. You don't
Right.
hear nothing from them. You
No.
don't hear anything from those folks. It kills me how they can be silent on things going on that they know aren't right. They know it's not biblically right. They know it's not from a humanity standpoint right, but they don't say nothing. You know, But we're conservative. We're conservative Christian people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for what you want to be conservative and Christian on,
Yeah.
you are. But things that you should be speaking out on that is not right. Is religiously, godly, whatever it is, but you don't say nothing. So to me, you're complicit. You might as well just say you go along with whatever he says or other people do. That his stuff is not right, and you don't speak out on it. You're complicit too.
That's right. They're vocal when everything is calm. They can tell you your shortcomings. But when things get tight and you need to have conviction and you need to speak out on what's right, they disappear. Except for when they need some money.
Oh yeah, they always gonna be there for that.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I see. You don't hear nothing. Ain't nobody willing to step out, and because this well-oiled machine knows how to quiet them. They can go in there and make things, especially now with AI, they can make things appear to be what they're really not. But I was just thinking about Obama's preacher when he first got elected, Jeremiah. I can't think of his last name now, but he spoke out and spoke his truth. And what did they do? Condemn him to the point of the machine told President Obama to disassociate himself
with him. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And so, and part of that machine that told him that was these so-called preachers that are disappearing now. So, but we know what the white media and what the white folks wanted them to do, because they found everything that they could find about this man, because the man told the truth. The chickens have come home to roost. You didn't have nothing to say when the white boy said that. So, yeah, man, all these folks that are walking around here with the only thing they have in common with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all those brothers who were and put themselves out there on the line in the name of the truth. Yeah, they'll quote them, but they ain't finna step out on that limb like they did.
No, they're not going to do that. Not going to do that. It seems like, unfortunately, the ones who do, like with the Black Lives Matters and things of that nature, they screw that up. They get, they go out and buy these mansions for stuff, and then all that comes back on them. So that makes that whole movement look like it was a farce, because of those things. You never had those kind of issues back in the days. I mean, because nobody had anything. I mean, it wasn't nothing. Nobody had nothing, even including the leaders, Martin Luther King and all. They didn't have nothing either, But these days in time, people got to have the bling and they got to have the stuff, and it just it bothers me when we do those things. You had a good thing going. I don't mean a good thing from a standpoint of monetarily. I'm just saying you were addressing a true issue, and you had a strong backing nationwide for that. And then what do? It goes from being out there protesting, police injustice and things of that nature to you on the headlines about why do you need these $1 million mansions and why are you spending all this money on this, that, and the other. The whole the whole meaning of the movement now has just gone to the back pages. Nobody cares anymore.
Which is what they want.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the difference between these new ones who maybe start out with good intentions, but that temptation get with them because they all want what the other leaders didn't. Like those leaders, King and all of them, they had a true love for the movement of the people. These folks are just trying to make it.
Yeah.
They trying to get over. It's paramount to like the 70s, when well, the 60s is when those leaders galvanized us. We were all on one accord. But the minute the government gave them Pell Grants out to these Negroes and they got a degree and thought they had arrived, that's when it started falling apart, and then they watched the economy shift on them because while we used to be down there in those ditches digging, looking up into the office building, wanting to be up there, well, they finally let us up in there and then they brought all them dudes out down in the ditches and gave them a pickup truck and started their own businesses, and now they still making the money. You up there making, if you're lucky, $50,000. And the cost of living done swole so many times before that you're really making 20, But
yeah. And
lost.
And I don't mind people who have done well. To
Right.
me, yeah, that's part of the capitalistic society. You
Right.
want to do well because that's what our society is built on. It's just I think sometimes we, as I say, forget sort of where we came from and reaching back and putting out a hand and trying to help that next person up because yeah, I know we have that syndrome of, well, man, if I help him up, he's gonna take my job. Well, if he's doing better at it, maybe he should.
Yep.
But somebody helped you up. If you help somebody else up, you keep the chain going. Because one day you're going to have to retire. One day you're going to die. But we got to the point to where, oh yeah, I made it. But I ain't gonna reach out my hand and help nobody else because they may take my job. So
Selfish.
it's just a sort of a sad situation that we've gotten ourselves in, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The propaganda, the images. All we see is people with the bling, and we hear stories on how these sports stars have these multi-million dollars homes and all that stuff, only to hear 5 years later they're dead broke. But that's all people look at. Oh, look at all these guys. Look at his house. Everybody had a show on their house. This is a house and that one's house. And that's what people see. That's what people see. That's what they see as making it. I need to be $1 million home. Well, the chances of most people getting $1 million home is very slim. Do well, live comfortable. You've made it.
Yeah. But see, that's our problem. They finally started letting us a little bit into the game, but we still don't know rules. You get in the game, and if you're lucky and play your cards right, you might hit a little spell where you're doing well, but you lose sight. We get a minimum of success and think we've made it. There ain't nothing else. This is an ongoing game of learning and making adjustments, not just one little. Just like black folks. Oh, I got my degree. Like, so what? You still got to go in there and perform. You got to learn. You got to stay ahead of the game as much as you can. And, you look at, I remember a friend of mine, he was telling me he had all these answers for what the shortcoming was on his job. So whoever was in that job retired or left or whatever. I said, well, man, why don't you go ahead and try to get that job? Man, I ain't. Well, wait a minute. How you think things are going to change, man? You sit here, and if I listen to you, it seems like you got it down pat. So why wouldn't you get the job? Oh, I don't want that responsibility, man. That ain't how the game is played. you go into something looking at the next step.
Yeah.
You know, you done got satisfied. Oh, I got this, and that's it. I'm done. I ain't trying to learn nothing else. Man, please.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta always be learning because the game changes.
The game
And you
changes.
don't change with the game, you get left behind. You gotta always be mindful of that. I've always felt
Mhm.
that way, you know. You gotta be mindful. I ain't say you gotta play the games, but you
Right.
gotta be mindful of the game. And if it comes to a point to where maybe you gotta play a little bit of the game to move ahead or help
Sure.
somebody else out, you have to do that. But just to sit back and say, "Oh man, I ain't gonna do that," yeah. Don't complain when you look back and look at life has passed you by. You know,
Yep.
you had your opportunity. You had an opportunity. You chose not to do that. Don't complain now. Don't
That's right.
complain.
And they didn't do you wrong. You did yourself wrong.
Yeah, wrong. Yeah.
Mhm.
Gave you an opportunity.
Yeah.
Gave you an opportunity. You decided you didn't want to take it. Don't complain.
Yeah. It's that I don't want that responsibility. Well, shut the hell up then. Because you sitting here talking as if you know how to solve it, but you don't, because you don't really know the whole inside of the whole thing. But there's an opportunity. They're putting a job out there. Go and get in there and find out, how you can make a change and why things are being done like they're done. But you
Yeah.
can go in there and make things, make it right and make it equitable for everybody, But like I say, we don't understand the game and ain't trying to understand it. All I know is that I got this and I'm happy. I told a young man when I was in Texarkana, I went over there, my old man shoes was wearing out, my Skechers, slip-ins. So I wasn't doing nothing. I went over there to get me some Skechers, and so I did. So this young man was behind the counter, young brother. He started talking to me, and I said, "You guys do military discounts?" And he goes, "I don't know if we do." I said, "You mean tell me you got 2 bases right here, right down I-30, and y'all don't do that?" He said, "I don't think we do, sir." I said, "Okay," finally checked, and I don't know if he checked or not, but he gave me a discount. Don't hurt to ask.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
so he was like, "Well, how long are you in the military?" So I told him how long I was in the military. He said, "Wow, I said, "Yeah." And he started asking me questions. I was just answering his questions. I said, "Well, the military is a good way to go." I said, if you'd asked me this about, well, hell, I can't remember how many years now, but I might have been a little skeptical. But I tell you what, it's about one of the best things going right now as far as longevity and retirement, because they ain't even offering retirements too much to anybody anymore. Hell, I think the military even done scaled theirs back the way they do it. And anyway, we got to talk, and I said, well, what you need to do is if you go in there, you need to find you a skill that's marketable that you can use once you get out of the military. And I said, there's several fields that you can get into. And if you want to try to go a certain way, I said, but there are certain things that you can get into that will lead you to something else. I said, I was in logistics, but there's so many facets to logistics. I didn't know about it when I was going in there. I just knew I wanted a job on the inside. I said, but if you think about it, it ain't no different than going to college. I said, you go to college for whatever, unless it's just one professional skill, you're going to end up working in some other profession. I said, so just go in and be willing to learn and be willing to be trained, because the more you know, the more marketable you are. And so I was telling him that, and he's like, oh, I never thought about it like that. I said, yeah. I said, you need to, if you decide to do it, you young boy, I said, if you decide to do it, get you something that you can use later on, because that leads to this and that begets that. I said, most people think if you go in logistics, you're just going to be in a warehouse doing all that, but there's more to the inventory process. There's more to budget. There's more to so many different things. There's more to acquisitions. That offspring sends you 12 different directions that you can go in. And so, just be cognizant of that. He's like, oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I said, yeah, man. I don't mind sharing what I know. I don't know a whole lot, but what little I know, I don't mind sharing it.
Yeah.
And so I forgot to ask him if he was planning on going in, but I'm sure he didn't want to be working at Skechers for the rest of his life.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to be able to talk to people from that, been there, done that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's people who went in the military, hated it, got out and went and did other things. But I've also heard a number of them who have done that tell me I wish I'd stayed, and I said, I understand. I said, I
Yep.
understand. There was a point where I was ready to get out, and I
Yes,
said,
sir.
I'm just so glad that I didn't make that, for at least for me, that bad decision.
Right.
And I stayed with it. I said, but who, I'm trying to think who was, we were talking the other day, something about the military. And I can't remember what the conversation was. And I said, somebody made some kind of comments about, well, military don't pay enough. You can't get along in the military. And I said, well, I know. I said, they don't pay you, you know, comparable community service wages in a lot of situations. I said, but there's other factors that you got to, you got to look at too with the different allowances and things else you get in. I said, but I think
Right.
it also gives you an opportunity to mature, have a sense of responsibility. And I said, I'm by no means trying to, toot my own horn and brag or anything. I said, for somebody who started out at the very lowest pay grade you can have in the military, I said, I think I've done pretty good, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
I would be, willing to put, sort of my career against anybody's career out there in the civilian world, period. I
Yeah.
said, but I said, it was a lot to do with the military. It helped me mature. It helped me learn things. And I said, but it also told me if you do the right things and make smart decisions, usually good things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you can't always go on what the pay scale is and all those kind of things. I said, sometimes you got to look at what that's going to do for you 10, 15, 20 years down the road, just like you said. Go into something that you can be marketable when you get out. There ain't a whole lot of jobs out there for tank drivers and rocket
Exactly.
launchers and stuff like that, and other, I mean, I'm just not trying to get bad at the army and all, but there's other, there's not a lot of jobs out there for a lot of career fields
Mm-hmm.
that are in the military. And I was telling him, I said, in the career field I was in, I knew early on it wasn't a marketable career field for males because most dentists wanted female dental assistants. I said,
Right.
but he gave me an opportunity to move up in rank. It gave me an opportunity, like you said, to work inside 5 days a week, 9 to 5 jobs. And I said, and it paid off in the end. So I said, yeah, you got to be looking at those kind of things too. It's not always about the dollar amount that you're getting and all that. Is you gotta look at that too. But
Yeah, and plus too, especially when you're young out there, just like I remember all them. Yeah, I'm getting out, man. You can't make no money in the military. You ain't finna make no money out there. Ain't nobody finna pay you nothing. You know, you ain't got a skill. You already left something that tells the person there about. Well, I don't know how stick to it that this guy is.
right.
And I'm saying, like I started saying later on, when you put it all together, I said, where else can you go? You don't know your ass from your forehead. And you can go get trained technically, or you can get trained on the job at a high level. You get a paycheck, you get a room, you get a meal card, you got everything you need. I said, you go out here on the economy now, you ain't gonna get paid nothing, but the rest of it is on you out of that no pay you get. So where's the advantage? Now, of course, when I was young, I wasn't thinking like that either. But, thinking about it now, that would have been totally foolish, to go out there basically unskilled, as far as they would say. But you got so many opportunities. That's why you have to look. That's why I always try to tell my boys, you got to look at your situation. It ain't as bad as it appears most of the time. And try to make the right judgment. I mean, everybody ain't going to make the right decision, but whatever the decision is, it's right for you because it's going to lead you to wherever you're going to go. But that right there just tells, at least you got an opportunity to make more money. Out there, you at the whim of some asshole that decides whether he want to give you a raise or not, or just wait you out till you leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It, like I say, it's not going to be the premium occupation or career path that most people will tell you about. But once again, I'm talking all in the past. Like you said earlier, I don't know what it's about these days. I've been gone for 40 years now, but I can at least say for me, it was the right thing to do, and was one of the main reasons that I'm sort of where I am today. Because
Yes, sir.
I was doing an interview, matter of fact, yesterday, and the guy was asking me about my military career, and I said, there's not many jobs you can go into as a young person, at least in my situation, where I got, 4 meals a day for free. I got a room to live in for free. I got paid regardless if I worked 1 day or 30 days during the month. I got all holidays off. I had a gym to go to. I mean, I had all the creature comforts you could want. And I could go to the hospital and get medicine and walk out the next day. I could go in the hospital and get major surgery done and walk out and not pay a dime. I
30
said,
days paid vacation.
yeah, vacation. I said, if you look at all those other aspect of things, it's not a bad deal. I said, but now, once again, if I was out there driving a tank in a war situation, I might say, well, there ain't enough money in the world for this kind of thing. I said, but I was fortunate enough that I was a medic, and I was in a career path that didn't have those kind of of options available that could be, catastrophic, kind of thing.
Right.
But you gotta, like I say, you gotta think about those kind of things. And I must admit, when I was young, like I say, I didn't think I'd make it 4 months, more or less 4 years. I was counting the days from day one. Homesick, didn't know nobody. I was just, I couldn't wait. I mean, it just amazing now that I look back on it, how bad I was at that point. And even later on, after a while, I mean, after me and Marion got married, I was talking about getting out, and coming back home. And she was like, Mickey, we're going to come back to McMinnville. You ain't going to have a job. I ain't going to have a job. We're going to stay with your folks. Yeah, I just don't think that's a smart thing to do. And in very much in reality, it wasn't smart at all. But, I was thinking about that, and on that drive back to San Antonio, reality set in and said, yeah, you married. Now you got, like, we didn't have the girls yet, but you married, you got a family, and you talking about taking both of you away from a job, going back to the city that you said one time you couldn't wait to leave, and go in with mom and dad. And I'm like, yeah, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? So, it ain't like, you make all those perfect decisions, or you have those perfect thoughts all the time. And as we often say, sometimes the Lord just looks out for you.
Yes, sir. Babies
He
and fools.
slapped me a couple of times,
Yes, sir.
figuratively, I think, on that drive back, and said, boy, you better wake up.
See, and conversely to me, I knew I didn't want to go back home. But here I'm down here in San Antonio running my damn mouth like I'm a general, on a fast track to be sent back home. I was like, man, thank you, Lord. You look out for children and fools, and I ain't no child,
I heard that.
I was like, boy, I'm sitting here, I don't know. I know a couple of times I called Rodney, baby, we might be going home. Something came out of my mouth before I even realized it,
Yeah. Well, like you say, you go through those things, you look back on it and say, yeah, but then again, sometimes you look back on it and say, now that I look at it, that probably was the thing to do, because it got somebody's attention.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it got somebody's attention.
Yes, sir. I was like, man. So, yeah, man, I would recommend it for anybody, especially not now, in these days and times, because I'd hate for anybody that I know. I hate it for the guys that are in there to be in there with this idiot who's so cavalier about your life, and I was even thinking about, I couldn't help say I feel for those guys who's knocking right at the door, just waiting for some time to come by so they can hang him up. But knowing him, he'll extend them, because I tell you what, I bet you them lines down at the recruiting station ain't long,
Yeah, I bet you they ain't. I bet you there's a lot of people who can put their papers in is probably putting their papers in too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There's probably a lot of them.
Did you see where Hexef is trying to ask all the gay guys that they kicked out when they first got in, want them to come back? I read
Oh, really?
that.
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I read it on one of the vines that I was looking at. He's trying to ask them if they wanted to come back. I was like, everything you idiots did, now you're having to rescind all of it.
Coming back on you.
Yeah.
Coming back on you.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that can say, looking back, there was some divine intervention that kept many of us from making bad decisions. Well, we hope that continues. Hope you enjoyed this edition. Join us next time for Old Fools Talking Old School. Until then, this is Mickey G. Peace.